All right. Hey there, ghosts and ghoulies. Welcome for... oh, shit, I sounded way too like Carol Baskin doing that kind of shit. Hey, all you cool cats.
Yeah, what the fuck was that?
I was like, you know what? I'm going to come in with a fun Halloween prompt, and it just sounded so Carol Baskin. Like, hey, you fuckers. Guess what?
It's Halloween.
Belated Halloween. Halloween doesn't stop for us. Because if you'll notice, the posting of this is a little bit delayed, but...
It's actually technically it is Halloween today as well. It's election day.
Exactly. One of the spookiest days of the year for me, in my opinion. Because honestly, who's ready for Civil War? I am. Just kidding. I'll probably be one of the first one to die. I'll probably get ran over by like a crowd of people waving dildos or something. Yeah, fuck him. He looks Republican. Help! I'm moderate.
Shit.
I'm just kidding. For whoever you voted for today, honestly, just doing your civil service is just big enough part. It doesn't matter. We don't need to be divided so hard about it. I mean, look at politics is just a thing we'll probably never really address too much on this podcast, but I definitely encourage voting. So, and with that note, let's draw attention to Woody over here.
Yeah, so
I love the costume.
I think it's a little small. I'm pretty sure it's a kid's costume. So the fact that the fact that it fits it all. Well, it's just the hat. I got my badge here, so if you get out of hand today, Mikey, I might have to... Oh, shit, it came off.
Yeah, there's a new sheriff in town now.
Yeah, so if you get out of hand, I might have to take you down to fucking...
I don't know if that's an official badge of the United States government.
It is. It says sheriff on it. On the back, it says made in China.
Do you even know your Miranda rights?
Who's Miranda?
Yeah, all right.
Anywho, so yeah, this is our Halloween episode. It's been much talked about. It's a little late. We both kind of had some prior obligations this weekend, which is fine. But we're adults. We're allowed to live life, and here we are. It's Halloween a couple days late, but yeah, our focus today is just kind of just the holiday of Halloween itself. A lot of our focus with this podcast has been games, so we'll kind of dive into some horror games, some movies, favorite memories, kind of that stuff. So,
which actually, I have one quick question for you to start off right away. What is the most memorable Halloween costume you've ever had? What would you say is like the one that just stood out to you? What was your favorite?
It's funny you asked that. It's actually you think like I'd go back to like, oh, I was like 8 years old and I was Tigger or I was Spider-Man or like this or that. I'm like, no. My favorite Halloween costume was actually a few years ago. I was Chuck Nolan from Castaway, the movie Castaway. So basically I I was at Freak Fest down in Madison. So I was walking around Madison, didn't have a shirt on, had like raggedy khaki shorts. I had like a wig and like a beard, and then I carried around the Wilson volleyball from the movie.
Hell yeah.
So that was my favorite costume. And a couple times while we were walking around, I just dropped my ball and it'd start rolling away, and I chased after going, Wilson! So,
but there's a couple of drunk guys like, ha, I love Tom Hanks. Just over there in the corner, like, and I'm just throwing up. Because I know... I'm guessing back in those days, you definitely partied a lot harder. You drank a lot more.
Yeah, this was like 2 years ago, so it would have been right when I like turned 21. I think is when I went. So.
Oh yeah, so
or the year
perfect
before.
time when it's finally legal for you to really jump into the drinking.
Yeah, is that how it works? Once it's legal, it's not as fun anymore.
Yeah, there's to explain to anyone else about the Midwest, particularly Wisconsin, there's two kinds of legal here. You touch your first beer usually around 10, and then it's usually don't ask, don't tell. And then you legalize like everyone else at 21. So
pretty much.
Yeah, we have middle schoolers getting drunk, which is interesting. Not all of them. Not all of us are out there doing that. Some of us are good guys, being stupid and not trying to kill problems of the world before we have them. But no, honestly, for me, my first memorable costume that really I loved actually is a callback to when I was a kid. I dressed up as a pirate, and I actually remember getting ready I think Brandon's mom helped me like touch up my mustache that I had drawn on. Even though if you guys remember me around that age, I still already had peach fuzz coming in, so the marker already started like catching it.
Yeah, I was gonna say you
Yeah, like I
just
didn't.
go with your mustache you had when you were in fourth grade. You're good to go.
Right, exactly. No, no, no. I needed it to be authentic and curl. Because I guess I thought all pirates had curly mustaches and eye patches at that point in my life, which obviously I've educated myself now, and I know they just had a lot of diseases. But
Yeah. Did you go around telling people you had scurvy?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why I have learning issues. I have scurvy. No, so yeah, pirates have always been a big thing to me. So that's one of those favorite standout costumes, and I just kind of wanted to bring that up just because I would love for everyone to share what they dress up with if they want to comment in the section. How'd you dress up for this year? I know it's a little difficult with the virus, but I would love to hear. I always love to hear about everyone's Halloween idea because I think it's that one time of the year where we all get to act like kids again. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go out trick or treating. You get to be one of the people who hands out candy, or you can have even little small get-togethers, 6 feet apart, dressed in costumes. So you can even implement a face mask into it. There's so many options. You could be a ninja, and like there's so many things that you could have done. So I encourage you, if you didn't dress up this year, dress up next year. It doesn't matter how old you get. If you're 15 to 55, you should always enjoy your holidays while you still have them because make the most of every moment. Going off of that, I would love to jump into scary video games, honestly, because just like playing Secret Neighbor with you recently had me kind of nosedive into trying to understand the psychology of it, and then playing Subnautica. And also, we played Dead by Daylight. Like, we've been really actually hitting the horror genre more than we usually have without even realizing it, to be honest. Like, we didn't do that because it was in the spirit of Halloween. That's just kind of the sequence of where our gaming's taken us. And, yeah, so it's kind of cool to reflect on how our brain just kind of synonymously just lined that up for us. But, yeah, I'm trying to recall the first time I actually got terrified of a video game. And it's going to be one that's really stupid because it's not really a video game. It's a pop-up scare. So do you remember the maze game where you have to
Yes.
navigate through? Yeah, and if the first couple levels are like really easy, and you're like, how could anyone screw this up? And then there's like a third level that gets a little bit more complicated, and you're like, oh, I can do that, no problem. I conquered those first two like nothing, and you get going and growing, and you move your little piece, and you touch the side of something else, and
Yeah.
just jumps out at you, and it's like, why would you do that to people? But then I reflect on it, I think it's hilarious.
I think there's actually a point. It gets to a certain. Alpha, it's like 5, 6 levels in. It gets to a point that dot, like that red dot, you have to go through the maze with. It gets to a point that the lane is smaller than it, so it like sets you up to fail.
Yep.
Like
You're going to get scared.
you're gonna get scared no matter what, if you like it or not. But
And that actually brings up an interesting point to me because are pop-up scares really scary, or is it a startling action? Is it more of the fact that it's just like it's kind of like a throwaway thing a lot of horror movies do nowadays, and a lot of critics actually tear apart, which is kind of funny because like you're watching a horror movie. If the jump scare actually scared you, you shouldn't talk shit about it, in my opinion. If you actually were like, "Oh, what the fuck was that?" Like, then you shouldn't have an opinion. But there are ones that are really like I don't know if you've seen some of these more recent horror movies that are overplayed, or they do the fake half-ass jump scare where they like set it up like, oh, there's gonna be something that pops up, and then the person turns around and then it's like nothing's there, and you're wondering why the person turned around.
yeah, I feel like a lot of it, which sets up these jump scares you're talking about, is like the sound effects, like the music.
Oh yeah.
So like
Oh yeah.
you're 10, 15 minutes into a scary movie, and there's been nothing but dialogue and just like environmental noises, and all of a sudden there's just this like low tone, like eerie music. It's like, okay, something's gonna happen. There hasn't been music the whole damn movie, and all of a sudden there's music. Now something's gonna happen. So like I feel like for me, obviously when I was younger, jump scares were like, that was scary. Like you watch a movie and you got scared because, oh, there's a bunch of jump scares. To me now as an adult, like I don't care for those movies. They're just like, it's something to watch to pass the time by. To me, a scary movie is something that's sinister, something that messes with your psychology, makes you kind of
yeah, definitely.
makes you afraid to like go into a certain room of your house or look up a certain topic. and I say the movie, the word sinister, and it makes me think of the actual movies Sinister 1 and 2. Those are kind of those ones that they're more of an entry level, like mess with your psychology and the way you think, kind of scary. Those are the ones that have kind of helped me bridge that gap between jump scare movies as a kid to the more psychologically challenging scariness of adult movies. So yeah, I feel like you're kind of the same way, just kind of the way you're talking about jump scares and how they're just like, oh, whatever. But
Oh
um,
yeah, and
something that makes
I'd
me
love to.
scared to like I said, think a certain way, or like I said, if it's something that messes with my psychology, like I got what I paid for watching that movie.
Oh yeah, and this is like the biggest point I make about horror movies. In my opinion, a true horror movie doesn't have to necessarily be labeled a horror movie. I think what defines a good horror movie, if you're not going for like your, even with classic slashers and stuff like that, it leaves you questioning at the end of it. If it leaves you with a question in your head about, so like to me, the more complex horror gets, the more terrifying it is. It's like a slow crawl kind of scare versus like the jump scare. I consider things rated on a level of horrifying, and to me, it's like jump scares are very low on that level. It's like a momentary like why why would you do that to me? And then you think about more sinister movies, the more complex concepts that it dives into. For example, like reflecting on the movie Sinister, kids are terrifying. And that's a tried and true thing horror movies rely on. Kids fucking scare the shit out of you if they're doing things that kids shouldn't do. And so when you think about that, like when you bring in that idea that this is literally a monster that preys on families by targeting the children specifically, this entity, this demon, this creature is using the kids against their own family. It's like, for when it calls into question, it's like, holy shit, these kids are either very, very strong when they're possessed, or like there's so many things, but like that you could pick apart, but you don't think about those until like you've watched the movie like 8 times because you're just sitting and thinking there like, holy shit, I don't want kids. This is fucking terrifying. Like, I don't want to have kids. What if they do this shit? What if it's 3 in the morning and all of a sudden I see my fucking son standing at the end of my bed just with a butcher knife? Like, hell no. For one, I'm gonna slap the shit out of him, and I don't care. I don't have kids. Don't worry. I'm not gonna abuse any because I don't have them. But if your kid was standing at the end of your bed with a butcher knife at 3 in the morning, staring at you deadpan right in the face, I guarantee you would think the same thing. You would slap the shit out of him. Your first response is not gonna be, oh, sweetie, what are you doing? Your first response after watching all these movies is, this is a horror possession. I'm gonna fucking time to eat my son. I'm gonna beat the devil out of him until he starts acting normal and plays with the Legos again. No, but all seriousness, no, child abuse is a horrible thing. But yeah, demon abuse, okay.
And it makes you think that I feel like a lot of those movies that the ones that mess with your psychology and are just beyond that jump scare, I feel like there's kids involved in some way. And even thinking about just recently around Halloween, my wife and I, we went through like the Conjuring series and like Annabelle and stuff, because you're supposed to watch like the 5 or 6 movies in a certain order. And looking at all those movies, like there's kids. Like kids are a very important part of it. One of them being, I think it's Annabelle Creation. And one of the scenes that I'm thinking of is when one of the girls, and she's actually paralyzed, or she has like polio or something in her legs or whatever, and she's like standing in this doorway and it's super dark behind her, and all of a sudden she like morphs into this tall demon. And it's just like if it was, obviously if it was an adult that happened, it'd still be scary. But the fact that like watching these movies take this innocent looking child and turn them and turn them into something evil, and like this, and like kind of on this topic as well, more of on the TV show side of things, is I love watching Ghost Adventures. I don't know if you've ever watched like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Nation.
Is that where the meme comes from? Where like, hey there, demons, it's your boy. Like, is that the one that?
I don't know if it's from that one's from Ghost Adventures. I'm trying to think what that's from.
I love it though. It always cracks me up. It's like, hey there, demons, it's your boy.
Yeah, it's your boy. But anyway, with those shows, a lot of the evidence that they'll get, like voice recordings, a lot of times it's the voice of like a small girl or a small boy, and a lot of times it's eerie because you know that, okay, it's this demon, this this entity, this something that's not human, taking the form of a child to be able to lure people in. And I feel it's such an interesting thing that the movie industry has targeted using kids um,
Oh yeah,
as
it's
that
100% a
yeah.
psychological thing too. They do psychological studies. Like they figure out what will impact the psyche the most in their movies and kids through and through. Like there's a I cannot remember the name of it, but it has a horrific scene in it, very graphic. Essentially, a kid gets decapitated, and you see the kid's decapitated head, and it's a very brutal sequence. I think it was on Netflix. I feel so dumb not remembering the name of this movie, but it is. I will mention it in a later video if I recall it, or once I look it up again, or even later in this video because I'll probably end up searching it. But yeah, no, it is such a horrific movie that definitely plays on the concept of kids because, and I think that goes into the human base psychology. It's in our nature to protect our young. We don't we look at our young and we look at them with innocence. We look at them with kind of like what's good in the world, you know? If you have a normal brain, you know, if you have a halfway decent brain, you look at kids, it's like what's good in this world still. You don't want the horrors of this world to creep into their existence. So to see that mesh, to see that combined and put into a movie, and it essentially becomes your existential crisis, your horror now. It plays on it's hitting several parts of your brain because for one, you find any mother and you tell like you have their kid possessed by a demon, that mom's not going to know what to do. They're not going to hurt their child, obviously, and that obviously going to be a big psychological toll on them. And that's one mechanic I do love seeing in horror movies where they kind of turn the family against each other and they play on that where it's like because they're struggling. They don't know what to do because they can't just like you're not gonna just pull out a shotgun and blast little Timmy across the room. Like, I mean, that would be hilarious. It'd be like the shortest horror movie ever. Like, you know, like the kid just gets possessed and like his dad's just sitting there. He's like an old school hunter kind of guy. Just pulls out the shotgun, just blasts him through the wall, and it just says the end. You could be like, what? But yeah,
Honey, call
no,
the exorcist. No, I got this.
yeah, I got the Exorcist right here. But yeah, no, it's definitely one of those mechanics I like. Also, there's another one that I feel is overplayed, but when done right is very good. For example, look at the movie like Bird Box, where they keep that ever looming presence that you can't see this entity. You can't see the major overarching evil that exists in your story per se, but you see the fallout, you see the impact it's having, and you could even imply there's a horror to Fallout. And I always love to call everything back to Fallout because I love it because you could think about if you actually sat there and you wanted to psychologically break down Fallout for what it is. Yeah, it's a goofy open like there's goofy moments, open sandbox world. There's a lot of horrible shit that happens in that world. This is a nuclear holocaust. This isn't like Disneyland, you know? It's not like as a player, you're like sitting there thinking like, holy shit, I can just beat the shit out of 8 Supermans. Imagine being a
Mhm.
real person in the universe of Fallout. It'd be terrifying.
Oh yeah, just because of the fact that you think about it, 90% of other living things you run into out there is trying to kill you.
Oh yeah,
The,
and post-apocalyptic movies have always been one of my favorite staples of horror. Just to mind you, I can name like The Road is amazing. If you haven't seen it, watch The Road. It's such a good movie. But anyways, sorry.
no, I was just adding to your point about Fallout with how, like you said, as goofy of a game as it can be, and how we add our comedic relief to it. In and of itself, it's a scary concept.
Oh
Nukes
yeah,
just took out the world. You're a survivor. You're going to go out, and there's going to be these different settlements and organizations of people that you have to try to work with. Some are going to be open to work with you. Some are just going to kill you every time they see you. like, and
exactly.
it's just a finding a way to survive, which kind of goes into the horror side of things. It's the ultimate thing is you when you watch a horror movie, a lot of times if it's a group of people, whether it's a group of kids, a group of friends, whatever it might be, you're doing the math in your head of, okay, they're going to die first and they're going to die. I bet this person's going to be the one that makes it to the end. You know what I mean? You kind of do that you secretly do that math in your head without realizing it.
Oh yeah, and like Just not to deviate too far, because I just want to mention this movie before I get it. But one of my favorite movies is the Cabin in the Woods, the one with Chris Hemsworth. I love because it kind of pokes fun. It's satirical. It pokes fun at the horror cliche, like you got to have the jock. But I love how it's like this whole government organization that's in place to appease the uh the old ones. Which actually, if you like research this movie, that's supposed to relate to the consumer, the person who watches these movies, and the whole premise of their movie is to kind of like poke fun at the horror genre. Like you have to do these horror like because a lot anytime people try to get creative in horror, it's always sketchy. A lot of people play horror safe because of their fear of flopping in the horror industry. It's hard to come up with something creative that can hit a mass audience. Like look at Paranormal Activity. They did it great with their first one. Their first one became a cultural like blowout. Like it was amazing. Like everyone was like, "Wow, that's terrifying. This is a really cool concept." And all of a sudden, you started seeing all these different found footage movies coming to life because everyone goes for what's safe. Another good series that I found really interesting. I dive into all realms of horror. So the VHS series. I don't know if you've ever watched those. I find those are a very fascinating form of found footage movies. They're all, but it's like a collection of various different horror stories played out in the movie, and it's I don't know, like I might actually revisit and watch them, but then there's obviously because they're just horror is such a broad category. You know what I mean? Because like I said, you can find horror elements in Fallout. Horror is pretty much anything that just rubs you the wrong way in the most terrifying kind of way. That's the way I define it. It's like it doesn't have to, for example, be that jump scare. It doesn't need to be Michael Myers standing right behind you, like with a knife ready to puncture your throat. It can be like the idea of like societal collapse and the world around you falling apart, and you or even internalized. It could be following a regular person like through their day-to-day basis as they are mentally degrading into like, for example, the Joker. The Joker has horror concepts to it. There are moments where you can just feel the tension building, and you just feel it's leading up to something bad. You know it's leading up to something awful, and I think that's why he's also such a good character, the Joker himself, and that's why he gets redone so many times. Is because he is a face of horror that you can't define. When you can't define horror, and that's why like I always use that, like I referred to earlier, is horror. A good horror will leave you with a question. It'll leave you questioning something, like how is this entity like this? Why is it like this? Why is this situation happening? And like what just and not like what could have been done? And there's things like that. And then there's mindfuck movies, psychological horrors, which, oh my God, that's a whole nother. I love those. I love movies that just completely flip you on your ass and you're just like, what just happened? I love those kind of movies that, like, there's a movie called Sublime. This is one of my first psychological horror movies I actually watched. Dude goes in for a colonoscopy, right? He's just going in for a colonoscopy, somehow ends up getting some surgery he wasn't even supposed to get because there's a mix-up, which, if anyone knows the medical world, that is so rare to happen. That does not, like, so, but it's still a terrifying fear. No, you don't want it, like, I don't know about you, but hospitals freak me out. I don't, there's something about them that are eerie. And the way this one plays it out is so well done. Because, like, it just it pretty much just divulges into kind of like your regular form of horror, but it just psychologically plays off like this dude's just losing his mind. And if you want to even look into the classics for that, look at The Shining. The Shining plays on so many different horror elements, and it's honestly a masterpiece. Even if you can pick it apart, even if it's not as scary as it was back in the day, it's a true horror, like, to me it's a masterpiece because there's so many things that are just set up to create suspense, and honestly just kind of leaves you questioning like what is going on. Like it leaves you with the what the fuck is happening in this hotel.
Yeah,
But
one movie I kind of wanted to bring up, and it came to mind when you brought up Bird Box, with kind of that hidden enemy, that hidden entity that either you don't see it the entire movie or there's minimal periods where you see it. And there's actually two that I want to touch on now. I just thought of another one. The first one being A Quiet Place with John Krasinski. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
So
Where
I actually haven't. I want to though. I've been
okay,
meaning to watch it.
so essentially it's just there's this creature entity that terrorizes the town. It's only attracted to noise, so basically the surviving people of this area basically communicate and live out their lives in silence or like sign language. Um, so and then it's a movie that you see the entity or creature or whatever towards the end a few times, but it's not one that is just like present there in your face the whole movie. You see it. um, Another one, which is an old one, and it kind of upsets me that they made a second one because it kind of ruined it, was the Blair Witch Project. the
They
first
oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
first the
Yeah.
first one from back in the well, I shouldn't say it. The newest one from like 2017 through 2018. It was that one was okay. You could tell it was like the as as much as it's a blessing, it's also a curse with movies nowadays. It's hard to get that old creepy 80s 90s vibe in movies because you're making them in 2020. So
Exactly.
like
You can't.
you could tell that that movie was like it's modern because they use a drone for one thing in the movie itself. Like a drone is a part of one of the scenes. But anyway, going back to the one in the 90s, it was like terrifying. Like it felt like it was real, and actually did research on it after watching it again for a few years back, just because it was like, is this a true story? Is it not? Is it something that is partially true and they skewed it to be able to put it into a movie? And it's completely false. It's actually, I think it's either high school or college students. It's a film that they made for a class,
Yeah,
which
and
is crazy.
yeah, I actually did that research. I've read a lot about the Blair Witch Project because I, like you, was one of those people when I first saw it. I was like, is this like just some kind of like taboo kind of movie that like people just made it seem more fake so that they could market it, or is this like actually just they're that phenomenal or of actors, or they're just actually feeling that real terror? Because there was no choppy acting in that. There was no. It felt like real. It felt like
Hmm.
there was no. It didn't feel like rehearsed. It felt like this is actually just them just going out in the woods, and I'm pretty sure that's how it was filmed. They just went out in the woods and scared the shit out of themselves. I don't even think the actors made a lot of money for that either, because it was like you said, a college project. Like I don't think anyone made a lot of money on that, except for when it finally hit a box office. All of a sudden, it blew up, and Blair Witch Project kind of established that whole legacy of found footage movies. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of like the grandfather of a lot of these. And I'm sure there's movies that predate Blair Witch Project, but that's the one that stands out in a lot of our generation's minds as this horror icon for that found footage like type style of movie. And
And
so
it applies to another category that's hard to do is, and it's a documentary category
oh
because
yeah.
it's not on this fancy multi-thousand-dollar camera and like the setting's perfect and this and that. It's filmed on a camcorder, and I've definitely seen more bad movies that are filmed that way than good. The Blair Witch is definitely a good one. One that I want to touch on. It's not really a horror, but it's Cloverfield. It's kind of like a knockoff of Godzilla. That movie like actually gave me a headache. Excuse me,
Yeah.
gave me a headache and made me feel nauseous because of how much the camera was shaking and how like just like bad the quality of the movie was. Like the storyline and like how it played out and just like everything except for the camera play was good, but it was just it ruined the movie for me just because of literally getting nauseous because of how much the camera was moving. But yeah, like and
If you like mockumentaries like that, it's a little dated now, but there was a YouTube channel called Marble Hornets. I'm pretty sure
oh, with
they did
Slender
a
Man, yeah, I watched
yeah.
all.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
I've watched
yeah,
those
that
through a
was
handful of times.
oh yeah, and that was very well done. Like hats off to them, because I give props to that creator, because they took a trend and they actually turned it into this they made it feel very realistic. Like this is actually like genuine horror that's happening to them. And I just felt like they executed that. That's how you should do it. If you're going to do it, if you're going to do a content creator, if you're not some big name industry, that's how you should do it. 100%. If you're trying to set up this horror sort of vibe in a documentary-esque style, that's I give it to them every step of the way. And I'm glad you mentioned Cloverfield. I don't know if you've actually seen the follow-on movies. Um, I I read up on the second one, and then I started watching the third one, which was on Netflix. I think it was like a direct to Netflix kind of thing, and it was like a space one. They were all in space. It was weird, and yeah, no, the second one I heard was a little bit better in terms of like actual horror. It wasn't too. It wasn't as like that. Wasn't as badly rated as the first one, if I remember correctly. And actually, what's the actor's name from Roseanne or the
Oh,
husband?
that's John Goodman. Yeah.
Yeah, John Goodman. Yes, thank you. I could not remember his name, and that's
Yeah,
horrible.
that one I like because that movie's only a couple years old, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
they're like
and
in the bunker, they're like in a fallout
yeah,
bunker. Yeah,
John Goodman is such a phenomenal actor, and he plays his role very well in that movie. He definitely leaves you with that suspense of like, is this guy crazy, or is he actually trying to preserve and protect this person? Like, and I definitely recommend people to go check it out and draw their own opinions on it. But I definitely feel like that was handled a lot better than the first movie was. And
yeah, I agree.
uh, just to mention another form of horror, since like I said, it's so broad. One of my favorite horror movies that stood out to me when I first saw it was the movie The Crazies. And like honestly, there's nothing too crazy stand out about it. But like thinking about the idea that literally that these people just up and kill themselves and then just kill other people, which is kind of Bird Box does that same thing. It applies that, but I feel like the crazies just executed it in such a good way, and it shows how the government would properly react. In my opinion, they literally locked it down. They fucking started murking people, and because like with the potential of them having that infection, that leaked virus or whatever it was, driving these people mad. Like yeah, like I think that's how that would 100% go down eventually. If you can't quarantine it, you're going to eliminate it, and I feel like that was played out very well, and it's cool. It leaves it kind of like ominous as they're moving to the next town because it pans out and it shows the virus spreading into the next town. And it's just like it sets up a recurring story and it leaves you with that question, which is like I don't know why that's such a big important thing to me with a horror movie. Like I don't mind when horror movies come full circle, but even look at the old classics. Like you always wondered if Michael Myers was really dead or Jason Voorhees or Freddy. Like you were like, are they really dead? Because they kill him several times. It's like, but are they dead? Like, are they? Because they can always pull something out of their ass to bring them back. Like, ooh, voodoo ritual. Or, oh, yeah, Satan was like, I need souls. Go get them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's always something they can do with that because it's suspension of disbelief. Like, you're already dealing with these supernatural entities that essentially, which.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, like we were talking about, it's called The Evil Within. You said one was made the most recent one was made a couple of years ago, and that kind of is what it feels like. It doesn't feel like there's any really recent horror video games that have come out that really struck a chord with me. Like even Outlast is a little bit outdated. I know the second one.
the second one came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, and wow, yeah. The more I think about it, like the kind of horror people are kind of jumping into now, it's not even really like horror. It's like games like Among Us, which is kind of, I guess, like a horror game, but not.
Yeah,
uh, I want to see more. I want to see that industry survive. Um, I definitely enjoy seeing horror elements in games. I think it's harder to emphasize with a game solely based around horror. Like the Resident Evil series is not going anywhere. It's like a mainstay. It's always going to exist. Uh, but I just feel like that's such a targeted market audience that it makes it very difficult to generate a true to like fashion horror game that speaks to like a mass audience. There's a pretty fun one that was like kind of like a you make choices uh and it impacts like what happens to your characters. Shit, what's it called? It was on the Game Pass, I'm pretty sure too. It's like you got to like survive these Wendigos. Fuck, what's the name of it? The name will come back to me. But anyways, that one's pretty good, but it's very limited in what all happens. And then you'll see the flops out there like Alien Isolation.
yeah, I didn't
I
care
just
for that
felt,
one.
yeah, I felt like it just wasn't. I felt it felt rushed for one. I'm trying to think. Honestly, like everything that I've really ever enjoyed about horror implemented into video games is the kind of horror that you don't expect. Like when I touch on things like Fallout and stuff like that, like to me that creates a sense of horror in some situations. Like and like it leaves me asking questions. I love to look up and search up things. So having more questions related to the horrible thing that's going on in this horror, uh, like be it the crazy concepts that happen in Fallout or Skyrim or any of these other games, like even in like there's elements of horror in GTA, like real life horror, like the fact that like you don't no one wants to get shot in the head, like
Yeah.
but so to see those little trace elements trickle into like mainstream video games is cool. Like there's one scene I like to touch on and bring up a lot because it's horrific. It's a horrific scene. It's something that I wouldn't say you would see necessarily in a full on horror movie, but it's the No Russian scene in Modern Warfare 2, and it's such a brutal scene. You gun down a bunch of people at an airport, and these are innocent people. It's not like you're forced to do this either. You get to choose to do this, and I feel like almost anyone who's ever played that game did it. I don't think there's a single person who read that prompt and was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna opt out of the game I paid for." Like no, but like when you think about the implications of that, like you just murdered so many innocent lives, and then that's a big fear that exists in the world today because of all the mass shootings and all that's been spiking in the last couple of years. Obviously, I guess that slowed down with the coronavirus, thankfully. That's one good positive lining we can take out of that. I mean, I'm sure there's still horrible incidents going on around the world, but there's no mass gatherings for mass shooters. Uh, but yeah, and if you want to touch base back on like the mainstay kind of horrors, like I like Outlast, but it's not a game that has a lot of replayability for me because it has a fixed storyline. In my opinion, yeah, it's terrifying, but it relies on that jump scare mechanic to some degree. Well, actually executing a decent story, but overall, it's not. It doesn't have that kind of replayability. And then there's a lot of games that have that same concept to them. That I think that's their biggest issue. It's like a game you buy and you play once, you know. And it would be interesting to see a horror game that kind of has maintains that replayability. Uh, and I think that's why a lot of these games jumped into the multiplayer industry, kind of like Dead by Daylight, stuff like that. Friday the 13th, which is on PlayStation and probably PC. But like a lot of people jumped into that industry because it gives it replayability. You can introduce things like skins to buy, and it helps that industry make more money. But overall, yeah, like there's really I can't think of one horror title in my opinion out of all the games I've played that like was a true to fashion horror title that I would go replay unless it's like around the spirit of Halloween. I just want to do it as like a recap thing, and I haven't played it in years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any that you kind of have that affinity to or desire to go replay again. Subnautica right now is actually a very fun one that we're both playing. Which definitely has its terrifying moments to it. But once you get past the sheer shock and horror of what you're facing, the nice thing I like about that game is it introduces new elements of horror. Like there's new concepts that get brought in. Like the deeper you go, things get freakier, it gets darker, and you gotta find better supplies. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to adventure into these deeper depths of this foreign ocean you have no concept or understanding of because you're on a whole different planet.
Yeah. And one thing with that game, that has a horror feel to it in and of itself for some folks is some people have a deathly fear of like open water, of oceans. And that's where you are. That's where this takes place. You're diving hundreds of meters into the unknown. Sometimes it's literally just pitch black. You're going straight down. You have no idea what's below you. You just know that there might be materials down there that would be useful to you. So like for some people to play that game, like I know Lake is one that he said he would never play it because he hates like open water. That's like a fear of his. Like that would be more of a horror game to him than to us. Obviously the creatures being attacked, even the survival mode of that, of you have to drink water and eat food to stay alive. Like that's like there's a fear of that as well, of your water level is running low. You're thousands of meters away from your home pod and you have no water on you. Like there's a fear that sets in of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. You know what I mean? So it's a game that it in its core can be just kind of an open world, just whatever game. But I like the way you said that just going into the unknown, and kind of how I talked about the fear of open water and kind of using that as fuel to that fire of making it more into that horror game feel.
Oh yeah, and like one of the mechanics about it that really freaks me out is the drowning concept, and it keeps it very simple. It keeps it's not overdone, it's not over exaggerated where you're like sitting there like flailing and grasping at your throat. It's just a pan to black. It slowly starts to fade to black. And having been someone who's experienced near drowning, because I've when I was younger, I don't know if I've ever told you about that. I actually almost drowned, and like seeing that slow fade to dark is just reminiscent of that because it's just like that's what it becomes. It becomes this moment of like everything is just closing off. And it's terrifying. It's such a terrifying feeling. And like, especially if you're swimming up from like 500 meters of depth, like if you're just fucking around, you don't care, there's not a fear to it. But like if you're genuinely like thinking about it, like this is a human being, they are fighting for their life, trying to get to air, and like we won't even jump to the concept of bends with that game because it's not existent. You can go like 1,000 meters down and then skyrocket back up, and you don't end up brain dead like most people should, or eyeballs bulging. But yeah, like but there is so much to unpack in that game and to appreciate, and that's what I love about like games like that. It's like it's the little things. Little things add up for me. It's not about like you can have one cool big thing. Like you look at a lot of the games that are in the industry these days, they have a lot of cool big things. I like seeing a collective of little things. And that like it's not so much a horror genre, but the world itself is depressing and there's a creepy vibe to it, is the Dark Souls world. And I would love to see you get into it with me. And Bloodborne itself for you PlayStation players, and they have this creepy sort of overall lore, and the world around them is bleak, and there's not really a single form of happiness. There's just less sad. That's all that really exists in that world. There's not really a moment of like where you're like, wow, this is a great time and everything is happy. It's just you get fucking murdered relentlessly by giant monsters or dudes who just can kick your ass in 2 hits, and all the while like you read the lore and it's just such a depressing story. But yeah, so I definitely enjoy games that have horror elements to it. I'm still looking for that one horror game that stands out to me, and as I start to slowly probably like transition to somewhat playing online PC sometimes, once I start, so that's probably my next venture, is to not have a crazy good laptop. Like I don't need a crazy good one. I just want to run some of the games that are on Steam just to check them out, just recommendations, and reactivate my old Steam account. So that's another thing too for anyone who's watching. Feel free to comment if you know any good horror games that are online. Send them our way. And like I appreciate all forms, like platforms of horror. I appreciate any kind of game style. It can be a side like me and Brandon were talking the other day about a zombie game that we used to play on like Armor Games or Epic Games. I can't remember which one it was, but it was such a well done zombie game. But you literally were just a character that moves like side to side like that. It was like that 2D kind of like you can't move really all around, but it was just really well done with such a good story that it was just very, very enjoyable. So yeah, no, for anyone who ends up tuning in, feel free to throw games our way. We'll check them out. We'll review them. We'll talk about them in later episodes because that's what we intend to do with a lot of the games we've played because we love gaming. And that's kind of what this whole podcast concept sort of formed on, because we want to share our experiences and hear about yours. It's not just about like you hear us talk and we just invite you that you have an option to tune in and say whatever you want with us. We will communicate with you. And if you don't see us communicate with you, you'll probably see it mentioned in a video. And you'll just know that we saw what you noted, and we definitely will give a shout out. But anyways, I'm out of curiosity, I gotta know, like, what is your favorite horror video game? Though.
It's probably Outlast, just with the whole series of it. It's probably one that I would just say that it's probably my favorite because it's the one I've spent the most time on. As far as, like you had mentioned, there's not a lot of replayability to it, but it has a good storyline to the point that if you go, every time you go through, you pick up on more and more things that you didn't before. and it's just I just love the concept of it as a run, hide or die video game. Like you don't get weapons, you can't defend yourself. It's a strategy game because you realize that if you make one wrong move, you're dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no there's no defending yourself. It's just like that kind of horror of like the helplessness of the situations you put yourself into. Like those are the games that I appreciate. And another one, and you mentioned it a few times, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, is Secret Neighbor. Um, and I'd played Hello Neighbor when it had first came out a few years back, and I ended up getting rid of it because I got frustrated with a point that I couldn't get past it anymore, and I just ended up getting or stopped playing the game. But Secret Neighbor is one that we recently had got into, and it's by the same creators. It's literally the exact same game. The only twist on it is that you're trying to get to the basement with your friends, and the neighbor who is trying to essentially kidnap all these kids and wins by getting rid of the kids is disguised as one of you. And obviously, the way we play, usually we'll know who if one of us is the neighbor. But I think if you're to play it either without communication or with random people that you don't know, it could add that extra level of like creepiness and horror and uncertainty to the game. Um, and it's one of those games that relies a lot on the jump scare ask of it because one of the neighbors you could play as is a clown, and you can disguise yourself as
Love it.
similar objects in the house like a chair, a pumpkin, a box, and you can just like hide in a spot and wait for somebody to walk through, and then you jump out and grab them. Um, but I think what makes that game the most, I guess, the most frightening and kind of has you on your toes is not knowing who the neighbor is. Like you're trying to ultimately find the keys to unlock the basement to escape, which doesn't make sense that getting to the basement is how you win the game. But it's you have an objective that you need to complete, but um, there's somebody who's basically trying to sabotage you and make sure that that doesn't happen. So those are between Outlast and then the Secret Neighbor. Those are two games that I've definitely spent the most time on and kind of just had that appreciation of that horror genre as far as video games go.
And I will make a point. I'll talk about this too, just because I'm sure people will tune in. They'll be like, "Wow, you guys barely talked about zombies or zombie video games." We gave a couple references to Resident Evil, but that kind of evolved since not just being zombies. It's more of this viral, like it creates different things that can happen. But even to give shout outs to games like Dead Island and like Dying Light, there's such good horror concepts in those. It's just I feel like there's so many zombie video games in the market that I don't really need to talk about them because it's kind of like one of the biggest staples of horror industry is zombies. So many people enjoy zombies and they probably have jumped into mostly zombie video games. So I just didn't really feel a need to mention them earlier, but I'll just bring it up real quick and give them that brief respect that they deserve. One of my one that I enjoyed in recent years was State of Decay. Actually, I actually haven't played the second State of Decay yet. I'm about to. I played the first one and I enjoyed it because like you get attached to these characters almost. You get like you build a rapport with these characters. You get to know them. You learn that like what they're good at and stuff like that. And you can end up getting stuck in a horde and that guy's dead. He's gone. He gets eaten. It's cool because they introduce in other characters. Like so it's not like a respawn system per se. It's kind of like you just got these new characters that you take over now and that other person's dead and it just feels more realistic about what happened in a zombie apocalypse. It's not like this guy's gonna respawn. And like Dying Light and games like Dead Island definitely utilize like moments of jump scares, but they execute them very well. Like the night mode in Dying Light is terrifying, in my opinion. It is so terrifying because like they're all super fast and they can chase you, and you got mobs after you, and it's just and you get to do parkour, so that's just cool in itself. So I'll give a shout out to that. But all in all, like for me personally, when it comes to horror video games, I can't pinpoint one that I enjoy as my favorite. I look forward to seeing where the industry evolves to, seeing what can be generated from it. and I hope to see something that just has that replayability, leaves you with that question of horror, that why, what is happening. I would almost kind of like a game where you like, I'm sure it exists and in some way or form, but like I need to specify that I haven't seen one that appeals to me, but a game where you're kind of thrust into a real life horror movie, maybe even with like other people, and like the horror itself is like AI generated. And like imagine like you're just at like a house or something like that, and like all of a sudden the power cuts out and like just something crazy happens, and it's your goal to deduce it like in like a more realistic kind of humanized way, to where it's like there's a serial killer or something. Like keep it more humanized, keep it more human level, to where it's like, wow, this is terrifying. Or even like have like a, you could even have like a team versus team kind of concept. It could be 2 people versus 8, and it's like, or 12, and it could be like a house party, and all of a sudden these 2 people are just deciding to go fucking kill everybody, and just make it like so just unique like that. Because then you have 2 horror people that can communicate with each other. They can strategize, but then you have this group of people that they can choose to work together. They can choose to try to survive for themselves. And I know that's kind of where this industry is moving towards. Like with games like Dead by Daylight, we get to see a lot of horror icons introduced in that. Like Michael Myers is brought in as one of their DLC, and then they have their own creations that they use. But I would love to see like a more easily access proximity chat for that, because I think that would really create a good sense of fear. But then that relies on the community as well. Don't be toxic. Don't be a toxic person. Don't be like, hey, he's over here. I mean, that'd be kind of funny to some degree. But yeah, kill that asshole. Get my last bag of chips. Like something like that could be fun. But then there's the people who will specifically like just try to find a way to ruin it. Don't be one of those people. If this kind of game comes up, don't ruin it. But and that's like a thing that we'll probably end up talking about eventually in a later episode, kind of our standpoint on community and how the gaming community, I feel like, is kind of losing. I wouldn't say all of them. Obviously, there's a lot of good gamers out there. I've met a lot of amazing gamers, but we lost kind of that connectivity to each other. I see more people, including myself, in party chats often than not involving themselves with other gamers. And because I don't blame them either, because the second you join in the game chat, it's, oh, you're a bitch. Yeah, like I don't even know you. I haven't even played with you yet. Like at least like let me like beat me before you call me a bitch. Like you know what I mean? Like there's the instant attack. There's the troll, and it seems like there's more of an abundance of them these days. So I just look forward to like hopefully one day getting back to like, yeah, the trolling is fun, but that's not what it's all about. There's about community too. Like we have one of the biggest communities in the world. The gaming community. Like, if we united and we came together, there's not a damn thing that could stop us in terms of what we want to see generated in our games. If we just, like, learn to communicate. Like, for example, the glitches in current video games. If we all just come together, we can get that resolved instead of people just attacking other people like, well, I don't have issues. But I just wanted to throw that in towards the end of this episode just to give a shout out to it. We'll probably talk more on it eventually. And, yeah, no, I feel like the horror industry is always evolving, constantly looking for that new way to just disturb your mind. And it's fun because the nice thing is you can walk away. You get the option to, with these games, these movies, you can walk away at any point and you get to get out of that fear. So it's kind of fun to live in that moment, have something that pulls you in, gives you that terrifying thought. And like I said, that's like the best ones will always leave me thinking hours later, like, what the fuck did I just watch? Or like what just happened? Like my brain hurts. I need to go lay down, but then I can't sleep. So and in terms of everything Halloween, I hope everyone had a safe Halloween. I know the restrictions with the virus made it difficult for a lot of people to take their kids out trick-or-treating, and I hope you guys made the most of it. And I honestly look forward to next year's Halloween. Hopefully you'll hear of a more extravagant showing from us. I'll be actually Buzz Lightyear, and he's going to be Bo Peep. So,
damn it! I wanted to be Slinky.
Oh, okay, fine. You can be fine. Then I get to be Mr. Potato Head. I call it. We'll be Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head.
All right.
Yeah, and then we can just start like swap parts throughout. I'll switch over to Mrs. Potato Head because they're interchangeable. They're the true androgynous species of the world.
We could be they. Well, we could just be they and they potato.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no Mr. and Mrs.
Exactly. We'll be the potatoes. The potato bros. I like it. So, and anyone who watches this, thank you for tuning in, as always. As our content starts to pick up and we start to move forward, as we get settled in, just with a lot of the things happening in our lives, because, we're adults. We got to do adult things every once in a while. There may be hiccups like there was recently, but just know that we don't forget. We will come back. We will create our content and we'll double up on it. And any wrinkle will smooth right out. So, with that, signing off.
All right, see you,
Happy
man.
Halloween.